Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show today, bringing you another really fascinating guest involved in creating a better tomorrow for so many people. Today we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Ismahane Elouafi, who is the Chief Scientist at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, which is an organization that leads international efforts to help defeat hunger and improve nutrition and food security globally. Dr. Elouafi leads the scientific mission of the organization, advocating for diversification and neglected and underutilized crops, promoting the use of non-fresh water in agriculture, rethinking food systems overall, and ultimately empowering women in science. From 2012 to this recent position, Dr. Elouafi was the Director General at the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture, based in the UAE. In that role, she helped spearhead the development and implementation of that center's long-term strategy, expanding its mandate into marginal environments in an agri-system concept where she'll ultimately mainstream global research and development. Dr. Elouafi, I previously held senior scientific leadership positions, including a senior advisor to the Assistant Deputy Minister, Agriculture and Agri-Food and Canada Research Branch in Ottawa, Canada, National Manager of Plant Research Section, and the Director of Research Management and Partnerships Division of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. She has also worked as a scientist with several international research organizations, including the International Center for Agricultural Research in Dry Areas, Japan International Research Center for Agricultural Sciences, and the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center. She sits on numerous boards of various institutes involved with food policy and food research, a member of the scientific group of the 2021 United Nations Food Systems Summit, and of the consultative group for the International Agricultural Research Systems Management Board. And she holds a bachelor's in agricultural sciences and master's in genetics and plant breeding from Hassan II Institute of Agronomy and Veterinary Medicine in Morocco, a PhD in genetics from the University of Cordoba in Spain. A couple fun facts: aside from being fluent in multiple languages, including English, French, Spanish, and Arabic, she's also trained as a fighter pilot. A lot of really interesting themes to get into today with her. Honored to have her. But Dr. Ismahane Elouafi, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Thank you very much, Ira, for having me today. Thank you very much. A pleasure to be with you.
It's really great having you. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion we're going to be having. I would love to start off, though, as we typically do, by giving you the floor a little bit to talk about your background. If we can go back to sort of what got you interested in this space. And I was really fascinated. I was reading and watching some shows about you. If you could take us a little bit from sort of that time in aviation high school in Morocco, where you're sort of training to be a fighter pilot, and how you got to writing a PhD on the quantitative trait loci determination of grain quality traits in durum wheat. I think that'd be a great way to start the show off.
Thank you very much, Ira. I think if I want to summarize what I have gone through is that I love challenges, and I have been maybe jumping from thing to thing because I was looking for that challenge. So I think I went to a military aviation school because I like the idea of becoming the first pilot woman. And I was very interested in mathematics. I knew how important mathematics is to understand aviation and planes and how they work. So it was like a way to practice what I like the most. But then once I went in, I mean, once the excitement of the moment passed, I look into military and I'm like, it's not me. It's not for me, that military hat. And it happens that the program got canceled. So I got a kind of a card. Do you want to stay or leave? And then I decided to leave. So, but maybe I'm a girl from the South, that I always say I'm a girl from the South that made it to the North. So I'm a girl that there is so many like me in the developing world that look for an opportunity really to do what they are able to do. So basically, I'm one of those few that got the opportunity really to study, to follow her dream, and to tour the world pursuing her dream of doing a PhD. So I had a wonderful PhD that was, by the way, funded by the agriculture, the grain agriculture producers in Australia. And that's really GRDC in Australia, the Grain Research Development Center. They paid for my PhD because they were looking for how could they use molecular biology to improve their durum wheat. And Australia is very known as one of the largest, if not the largest, durum wheat producer. And hence they needed to know the genes and then use marker assist selection to speed up their breeding process. And that's how I got my PhD in Cordoba University. And I always wanted to learn Spanish. So I picked Cordoba because I wanted to learn Spanish, among other reasons. And then in that time, I had really the chance to do my fieldwork in Syria with ICARDA. And I was doing my lab work in Mexico with CIMMYT. I had the chance to go after different technologies in different universities. So I spent 2-3 months in Viterbo University in Italy, Toscia University in Viterbo in Italy. I spent 3 months in Cornell University in the US. I went to McGill. So it was a really an exciting time where genetic and molecular biology was developing, and I was given a chance by my professor and by the project and the managers of the project to really go from lab to lab, get that technology and bring it back and train a young scientists that were from all over the world on the technology. So that was an exciting time, sincerely. That's where I come from. I grew up in a small, on dit en français, Patelin, a small town in Morocco. And within Morocco, I had the chance to live in a very dry area. And my dad became a director. We moved to a mountain area with 2 months of snow. And then we moved back to Marrakech. So even within Morocco, I think I had the chance to live in different ecosystems. And that got me really more understanding and more appreciation of the difference of ecosystem. Every ecosystem is different, and the organisms that live in that ecosystem, it's completely different in many ways. So I think all of this diversity and the chance to really travel the world and meet different people and work with different teams made me more tolerant than ever. I mean, maybe I wasn't this tolerant, I wasn't this open, but now I could really qualify myself as a very open-minded person that loves diversity. And it's very sad to see that we are losing diversity in everything we do, in our food, in our plants, in our clothing, in everything. And diversity, it's richness, it's wealth. We should not lose it.
Well, it's interesting because, looking at FAO, it is a quite diverse organization in terms of the number of members, close to 200 members of the United Nations that are represented there. And while the organization has been around since 1945, your position is rather new in sort of being at the epicenter of all things science that are occurring in this goal of defeating hunger, improving nutrition, improving food security. Talk a little bit about the role, if you would, and introduce us to sort of when it was formed, when the director general called you up and said, "Hey, I have a new position for you. I want you to take care of this now." Take us into that.
So Ira, you said it, it's a huge organization. It's an organization with about 15,000 employees, with 194 member states, with offices in 130 countries. Yeah. And our mandate is super large. So our mandate, it's everything about agriculture, including forestry, including aquaculture, fisheries, you name it, and food. So everything that we eat, basically. So the mandate of FAO is large. The organization is very large. The organization is also old. It started, as you said, it's 76 years old. But I always say FAO has been always technical agency. So FAO, it's not like other organizations. The FAO, what we do at FAO, it's provide technical support to the member states, and we provide them policy support that is based on technique, on the technical side. So we are all about science, technology, and innovation. We can't serve the members unless we are very technical, we have experts, we understand those sectors, and we provide know-how and knowledge, and we help countries to build their own capacity. So when the DG called me and told me about the position, I was very excited because he is a geneticist himself. Yep. He's a scientist. He moved from science to management within China and then came as the new DG of FAO. And when he came, he put in place the chief scientist position, but also the Office of Innovation. So basically, the purpose of the position is to provide an accelerator to whatever we do so that we use much more science, much more technology, much more innovation to get to our mandate and to get to our target, which is mostly the zero hunger, the SDG 2. So our purpose, raison d'être, it's really to bring that zero hunger to zero. So really not have a hungry person. And unfortunately, that's not the case. If we look from 2017 to now, the number have been growing a lot. And this is a huge worry for us all at FAO. So if I want to back up a little bit, what I want to say first is that really, when we talk about agriculture, it's part and parcel of everything. Because agriculture, it's part of the way you use your natural resources. Agriculture employ a large number of people across the globe. Agriculture, and when you look at agri-food system, particularly with everything related to it, with the processing, with the logistic, with the transportation, you get about 3 billion people that work in that agri-food system. And hence, it's very important for the economy. But also agriculture is the only sector that both emits methane or gas or greenhouse gas, but also sequester carbon. So there is no other sector that can do both like we do. And hence, for us, agriculture is at the center of all SDGs, but it's mostly the most important one for both SDG 2 and SDG 1. And that's where our new strategic framework, it's very much focused on SDG 2, zero hunger, SDG 1, how could we use agriculture and use the agri-food system to get people out of poverty. And the third SDG that we are talking about, it's SDG 10, which is reducing inequalities. So SDG 10, it's very important because that's the inequalities. It's basically the underlying issue that really get us to miss many of the SDGs, particularly SDG 2 and SDG 1. So from my perspective, but also from the whole core leadership at FAO and the DG and our members, what we want to do in the next few years, and that's our strategic framework for 10 years, 22 to 31, it's transform our agri-food system to make them more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable. And to do that, what we came up with, it's the 4 better. So how could we have a better production? How could we have better nutrition? How could we have a better environment and the better life, leaving no one behind? And my role as chief scientist is to bring the best science and technology and innovation for the better production, the best science to get a better nutrition, the best science to really protect our nature and have a better environment. And the 4th better, I think it's the most exciting of all, because we talk about better life, leaving no one behind. And that better life, it's how could we have a better life and livelihood for farmers and people working within the agri-food system. So my role is really to bring science to bear on all of them. And maybe before I get back to you, I want to clarify that innovation is not only technological innovation. It's not only digital innovation, because digital, it's one of the kind of technological innovation, but we want to also strive to have more policy innovation, societal innovation, institutional innovation, financial innovation. So it's a very broad sense of innovation, and it includes a lot the local knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, and different way of doing it. So there is something wrong in the way we are tackling international development, and that's why the numbers are not encouraging at all. But what if we look at it, we dissecate it a little bit, and we understand it better, and we change the way we work so that we get to the 2030 development agenda, and for me, for the farmers to have a better life and better livelihoods.
Outstanding. Yeah, let's individually go into each of these, because I think they're very, I mean, all four of these better baskets are extremely exciting, and you've been very active in all of them, not just in running the science organization, but in your own research. And I thought, just an interesting place to start, as I mentioned in the bio of the show, because you have been advocating for not just neglected and underutilized crops, but also existing crops that we can modify for non-freshwater agriculture and so forth. You have published over the years on topics like looking at unique quinoa genotypes in hypersalinity and conditions. You published on salicornia, which is a interesting saline tolerant crop. And then they had this article in, I think it was in 2021 in Nature Food, talking in general about diversification for advanced food system resilience. Talk a little bit about this space, because I think this is, we think of the deserts and the coastal deserts and just all the, let's say, inappropriate soils around the world that have these conditions that it may be so ripe for technology and innovation on this front. Take us a little into this in terms of better production per these unique environments.
So maybe, Era, let me start with what does it mean marginal environment? So for me, the marginal environment, and I came to really be interested in it when I moved to ICMA, and I start looking at dry land and saline affected areas. And then when I start looking at it and discussing with colleagues, we got the numbers that the majority of, or the poorest of the poor, are always in marginal in agriculture areas.
Right.
So basically, if you are on an arable land, it doesn't matter. You are in India, you are in Morocco, you are in Canada. It doesn't matter where you are. Definitely you are not, because of the fact that the ecosystem, it's arable land, and you can produce and sell in the local market, regional or global market. Whereas the poorest, when you are in a marginal environment, if you are in a rich country, you don't have an issue. But if you are in a poor country, in a marginal ecosystem, you can't produce enough for you to eat and to have decently. And that's where I got really interested in it. And I said, behind marginal environment are marginalized people,
right.
People that we have left behind over years and years, and we were not able really to pull them out of poverty and malnutrition. And that's where I start looking into what could we do in science to get those people to have a better production, to have those people maybe to do ecosystem services, but get paid for it. And that's where I got really interested in looking at how could we have different plants and animals that work better in that ecosystem. And by default, every ecosystem, it's meant to produce something. So an ecosystem for let's see, fruit trees like apples, it's completely different than an ecosystem for acacia trees, for example.
Sure.
Or an ecosystem that produces rice, it's completely different than an ecosystem that produces quinoa, for example. So different ecosystems are meant to produce different things. And what we have done with monoculture is that we pushed all ecosystems to produce the same. We did not respect the requirement of the ecosystem or the requirement of the crop or the animal that we are producing, and we start really producing massively different things in different places. And by doing so, we lost a lot. Not only we degraded our natural resources, and we use too much water, we use too much input, we degrade soil, but also we lost diversification. And really, and that's really, if I want to sum up that interest for me, is that really, I think that diversification is the key word here. We need really to diversify our agri-food system, and we need to do so because that's the only one way for us to produce more with less. That's the only way for us to have a better nutrition. So most of those neglected, underutilized species that you mentioned, be it on the animal, be it on the plant, they have not been bred for many centuries or many thousands of years. So when we take them, what we're going to find is that they are still at their genetic diversification as it happens over millions and millions of years. Whereas what we have been playing with genetically, we have been mostly breeding them for quantity. So because of the Green Revolution, because of the hunger that happened post World War II, what happens is that we marched, all of us, with the Green Revolution. And the Green Revolution started because a scientist actually from Japan find what we call the nanism gene, the gene that makes your wheat, instead of being 2 meters, your wheat became 7 centimeters. So you don't have any more lodging problem, you don't have any more many diseases problems, and so on and so forth. So that nanism gene allowed us really to start the Green Revolution that was championed by Professor Borlaug. And then from there, what happens is that we narrowed very much our genetic base. So we start doing mostly those crops that are the most staple crops, wheat, rice, and maize, and then potato was added later on. So what we did then, we narrowed the diversification, and in the same time, we overused our natural resources, and we are at a situation where we need to do something different. We need to go back to diversification of our crops and animals. We need to produce more with less, so we can't anymore afford to pour water too much. And that's where the idea of alternative waters is very important, because on the planet Earth, we have only 3% fresh water. The rest of it is saline water. Most of the groundwater has been used in many of those ecosystems that are a little bit harsh. So hence, people are stuck to really look for other source of water. There is desalination, of course, but desalination is very costly and only some countries can afford it. So the other source is to really to use other marginal waters. So it could be gray water, it could be treated wastewater, it could drainage water. So that's where we need really different plants that have that tolerance to salinity or to low quality water to produce food. So that's where the diversification is. And I was very happy to team up with colleagues like Thomas Hertel and a few other colleagues to write up a paper on the need to really to diversify our agri-food system, and to do so really looking at the whole agri-food system and see how diversification is key to build up resilience for all actors, mainly for the producer, the farmers, but also for all other actors across the value chain.
And moving from those marginal, high salinity, drought-prone environments on land, sort of on the green, you just mentioned the 3%. Now we get the 97% of very salty water. I heard you on the Nature podcast just a little while ago talking about also, move to the green to the blue and the blue foods. Where, I mean, obviously we have quite a bit of salty water out there, and a lot of area. What's your vision in terms of where we're going in terms of either enhanced aquaculture per the oceans, or again novel varieties, whether that's marine or phytoplankton related and so forth?
I think the blue food, it's huge. The transformation of fisheries and blue transformation, it's huge. Right now, we are taking only 1% of our proteins from aquatic food. So it's very little. I mean, when you think about it, 99% of our protein intake as human being, it's coming from terrestrial food. and only 1% for marine food or aquatic food. So you see that the potential is huge. But also, other than proteins, there is a lot of nutrient in fish in general, or even in aquatic plants that are very interesting. So we know a lot about omega-3, but also there are other. There is many other polyphenol and other nutrient and amino acids and enzymes that really can come. So the potential is huge, but we have to do it right.
Right.
I mean, there's a huge interest right now in fisheries, be it animal, as you said, or algae or phyto, but really we have to do it right. We have to make sure that we understand the ecosystem, and that as we are producing, as we are taking, we are making sure that we are protecting the diversification and the balance between populations. Because what happens is that the synergies and the cohabitation between different microorganisms or different species, it's based on a balance. And as far as we disturb it, we could have really very bad impact in terms of maybe the life and livelihood of those species, and maybe also we could push some species completely to disappear, and we see a lot of extincting species. And particularly in the marine, we don't know much. I mean, even on the planet in general, even on the terrestrial species, there was time where FAO we were saying that we have about 500,000 plant species. Now the new number based on our modeling, it's 400,000 species. So even on the terrestrial species, we don't know them all, particularly in certain ecosystems. In the marine, we know very, very, very little. So we might be disturbing and pushing many species to extinction without knowing. So what we need to do is, have a very strong baseline of what's happening, understand better the marine life and the marine ecosystem, and then produce in a more sustainable and more logic and science-based methodologies. But definitely the blue transformation, it could be a saver actually for us as human to really reduce not only malnutrition, but also many other targets in the SDGs.
And moving more towards that theme now of better nutrition, you know, I guess you created this term, but it's in the Frontiers Nutrition 2022 May, Freedomics, data-driven approach to revolutionize nutrition, sustainable diets. And, you know, in this paper, you define Freedomics as the application of omics technologies to characterize and quantify biomolecules to improve well-being. And, you know, what you were just saying, you know, because I have a little experience in sort of the phytopharmaceutical space from a couple careers ago. But one of the things we overlook, as you were just mentioning, is, you know, when we consume that plant, the tomato, the maize, whatever, aside from calories and those macronutrients, we're getting this combinatorial mixture of all these potent, you know, phytomolecules. Many of them, even in the common crops, we don't know what's there, let alone, as you were just mentioning, the hundreds of thousands that are sort of not traditional. Talk a little bit about this theme of Freedomics, because I think this is an extremely important concept.
Absolutely, Ira. And I think really this is one of the frontier attempts to understand better what food means and how they are interacting with our human bodies. So I was really very pleased to co-author the paper on Freedomics. And as you say, it is really the application of omics technologies to both characterize and quantify biomolecules to improve well-being at large. This has really a huge potential, this project, and Freedomics at large has a huge potential of really elucidate what is in food, how this composition varies across the food system, and how diet composition as an ensemble of foods guides outcomes for nutrition, health, and sustainability. So definitely, this is quite a leading wave, and we were able to do it only because we can handle big data. So in the old days, we didn't have really that capacity or computing capacity to really manage big data and see how the data help us really to understand what's the impact on nutrition or on impact on health or impact on the target on the environment, for example. So with the Freedomics data, we have the potential to more precisely define what comprises a poor diet and what is a healthy diet. So I think many people say, because we are in different culture and we have different inclination in terms of diet, what seems to you healthy might be not healthy for me, or what seems to you tasty might not be tasty for me. So now when we look at molecules, then it became different. It's not about the taste, it's not about perspective, it's exactly about an enzyme and what's the pathway of the enzyme, right, or what's the interaction between your gene and that particular food. So what I'm very excited about this PTFI project, whereby really we are looking at food, we are not looking at commodities, because we had a lot of research on commodities, but by the end, I'm not eating a potato alone. Most of the time, I'm eating potato, part of tagine, if I'm from Morocco, or yep, part of something else. So it's very important to bring in perspective the environmental impact. As a geneticist, we always say there is the genetics, there is the environment, and there is the interaction, the G by E. So that G by E happens also in our bodies. And maybe we didn't pay attention to it, and we couldn't understand it. Actually, it's not that we didn't pay attention to it, it's that we did not understand it because we didn't have enough data. But today we do. We can understand better the interactions of the different molecule and biomolecule in different bodies, and understand better and bring the comprehension to a much more complex level that hopefully will get us into plan for maybe nutrigenomics, for yep, personalized nutrition, yep, people that might be better eating this way at this time within these conditions. So if the more we understand, the better we can really bring our food to serve us as human, and to make sure that we are eating it the right way and eating it at the right portion as needed by our bodies. Keeping in mind that we are all different, and our genes in many ways, and even the interaction within our body or within our biome, for example, that's another area. The biome per se, we didn't pay attention. I mean, most doctors used to calculate a little bit the population of bacteria and microorganisms, but we didn't know much about it. Now it's an area that is very much under the loop. There are many research areas that are trying to understand what's happening in our guts. And I was very excited when we were working on saliconia, and we were promoting saliconia as a new crop as a feed for animals, as biofuels, because it has an oil, 30% oil, but also as food. So when we came in the food area, there was a lot of skepticism. People saying it's so salty. So how do you know it's okay for us to eat it? And we started working with a doctor, the key scientist running that project, Dr. Cici, started working with a scientist to look really at the interaction of saliconia within our gut system.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. No, it's
so it's as we venture in new food, we have to understand, and hopefully by providing that know-how to the people, you get them more inclined to eat saliconia if they know that in the contrary it wouldn't harm them, but rather maybe replace the normal salt that they take. Right. That would be a plus, and that was exciting. Whenever you bring in new things, then people start asking the question, and it's good to do research really to elucidate what's happening.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think what the interaction there between, as you were just saying, the microbiome, and then this term, the nutrigenomics, which I know it's been around a while, but we've just, I think the tools to really exploit what's the information that's going there is just have really gotten cheap enough that we can start doing this on a much larger scale is just really exciting. And so I'm glad that this is
And that's
part
true,
of the
yeah, and
vision.
that's why we are at our best time to innovate. I mean,
Yeah.
most of those technologies, as you said, were just too expensive. We couldn't
Yeah.
afford really to do the span of so many species. But now it's much more affordable. We have the computational power to and capabilities to really compute this data and make sense out of it. So
Mhm.
it's a better time than ever. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at as far as you go, but we never was at this level of knowledge and this level of 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 being able to do so many screening at different levels.
Mhm. So we talked about better production and better nutrition. Let's move to better environment now because you recently, a couple months ago, you recently published in Sustainable Science 2022 November an urgent need for COP27, confronting converging crises, talking about sort of this intersection this between climate, ecology, human systems are converging, and you know we recently had Dr. De Gederhoen from the World Health Organization on. He's part of the quadripartite relationship with FAO and the UN Development Program in terms of antimicrobial resistance and that theme. Talk a little bit about, I mean, the intersection, and especially because food is as you've been mentioning, it's just a part. It touches on all of these unique ecosystems. Talk a little bit about this paper and some of what you know you experienced per COP27 and where you think the sort of critical learning points are here.
Yeah, Era, let me start by saying that I was really excited that finally COP27 brought a lot of attention on agri-food systems at large. So we had about 4 or 5 pavilion on different components of food. We had the pavilion ourselves with the CGR system and Rockefeller Foundation on food. So it's this COP was different in the way that we have much more spotlight on the agri-food system. And the why is that finally, I think we understood the interconnectedness between everything: climate change, agriculture, health, nutrition, zoonosis, diseases, and what have
Yeah.
you. So there is a better understanding of this interconnectedness, but also because finally we are talking adaptation. So there was a lot of emphasis over the last few years on mitigation, and we did very little for adaptation, unfortunately. And today, more than ever, given really the cry of IPCC with so much evidence that we are going beyond 1.5 degrees and that we need to really activate and action much more our initiative to reduce the global warming, we need much more international attention and much more investment in terms of climate adaptation. And within that, I think, again, the poorest of the poor are the losers. And we saw it last year. We saw the flood in Pakistan. We saw the flood in Nigeria. And we have numbers. We have numbers that showcase that Pakistan, it's not putting so much, it's not contributing much to the greenhouse gas, but it's one of the countries that got hit very, very badly last year by the floods. And we saw that across, I mean, there is no single continent or country that could say we don't have climate change, we don't see variability, or we don't see differences in terms of cycle, in terms of either flood or drought or heat or cold. So there is a general agreement now that there is global warming, that there is the climate is changing, and we need to understand it, and we need to invest more in adaptation. And that's really where the paper came. The paper wanted really to clarify that adaptation, particularly at scale, requires global available local data. We need reliable analytical techniques. We need community capacity to plan really adaptation strategies, and we need resources. Those are resources in terms of knowledge and data, but also economically and financially. And we need to do that very, very quickly. And for FAO, last year, as part of the implementation of our strategic framework, we developed 2 strategies. Those are the 2 main strategies for us. One of them is on science and innovation, and the second one is on climate change. So those two strategies are hand in hand, and those two strategies really put emphasis on really that we need to act locally, regionally, and globally, but particularly locally. And in the locality, what we need to do is provide people with options, provide policymakers and farmers with options that can move them to a more resilient and, as I said, more sustainable agri-food system, but also provide them with enough incomes. And that's where innovation comes to play. Innovation could allow us to produce more with less. Innovation, if adopted at scale, could make us really get to our targets. And we were very happy that the Egyptian government really pushed very much to launch the FAST program, the Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation Initiative. And this one really aims to improve the quantity and the quality of climate finance contributions toward food system by 2030 to support adaptation and particularly to limit global warming to below 1.5 degrees C above the pre-industrial levels. So in the grand scheme of things, if I want to say it in other words, the agriculture sector, other than being a sector that has both capacities to absorb carbon and to emit, it's also a sector that's going to be the losing sectors. Because right now, agriculture use, for example, in terms of water, about 75% of total water. It uses a lot of energy and input. And particularly in terms of water, as other sectors will demand more water, be it urbanization, or be it, for example, mining sectors or others, agriculture will have less water that is allocated for agriculture. And that's where we need to transform the sector, and we need to reduce both the environmental footprint of the sector, but also the water footprint of the sector, as water going to be one of the major issues, or the scarcity of water will be one of the major issues going forward.
Couple years ago, I hosted on an episode a member of the Warani peoples of the Ecuadorian Amazon, an indigenous people that they viewed the rainforest not just as a spiritual place and as their pharmacy, but obviously they're the resource for food. And they knew things that, if it rained at night and these birds were not making any sound, that you don't pick these fruits over here and so forth. And I found it fascinating that you, in addition to all the really high-tech innovation that you have going on at FAO in terms of precision agriculture and machine learning and AI and all that stuff, you have this fascinating Indigenous peoples and Indigenous knowledge program focused on ancestral agricultural systems. These people have lived thousands of years and very comfortably where they are, and there's millions of them out there. What can we learn from these unique ancestral agricultural systems as part of the innovation package?
Yeah, you said it, Ira. It's when you look at how many years, how many thousands of years they have survived. And as a matter of fact, they were the first people that talked about climate change. They were the first people that say, we're messing up with nature, we're messing up with our ecosystems. We need to respect it. We need to do different things. I had really the pleasure of working with the Indigenous people in many parts of the world, and I have a huge respect for them. When I was small, and I told you we moved to the mountain area, I was really, and I was only 8, 9. I remember I was really mesmerized how people manage water. So water in the mountain area of Morocco was inherited from generation to generation in terms of time, because it's stream of water, and people do agriculture in the either in terrace, or depends how the land is, and they were inheriting water to the point where maybe at certain generation, I have 5 minutes per day and the other person have 10 minutes or 30 minutes. So it was very precise. It wasn't really not organized. It was very organized. It was very precise. And from there, it shows really that they value water, they value the system, and they have organized it in a way that works well. I remember also I visited many Indigenous people in Canada and in the US, and it was very nice to get them to see how spiritual it is, how they are looking at the species in a different way, and they cohabitated with those species in a different way. So Indigenous people have a lot of knowledge that hasn't been written, that hasn't been explained maybe. But really what we know is that it has allowed them to live in more harmony with nature for much longer time. And where we are trying to do at FAO, and I was very happy last year at the Science and Innovation Forum, we did also Indigenous innovation labs with our Indigenous unit that is run by a colleague called Dion. And in there, really, what we were looking is how could we really bring the Indigenous knowledge? We don't need to explain it per se scientifically. We don't need to have trials the same way we do in science, but at least understand and have some recommendation from it that will allow us to transform our agri-food system. And the way we did it, it's really to open up. It's with the Indigenous people, they want to make sure people can listen to them and respect their knowledge. It doesn't, as I said, it doesn't need to be X plus Y, Z, and we have an equation, but it's knowledge that has value, that have been proven in nature and proven over years. Now, how could we take it and translate it to something else and allow us to really transform our agri-food system? And that really was the debate, looking at how could we use, for example, ways and means, including AI, to really mine the different information we have in different countries, in different languages, to understand better their local agri-food system, or to understand better their native species and what they are used for. So it's a nice combination of very advanced science with very mature and very old and ancient knowledge. And I think if we succeed in that mixture of bringing the new with the old, we could make it happen. Hopefully, we could really produce more with less, and we could use AI to understand better that Indigenous people, Indigenous knowledge, and that local knowledge that we are completely dismissing right now because it's not published in peer-reviewed papers.
Absolutely. No, it's such an important point.
I hope it will happen, and we have our next Science and Innovation Forum in October this year, and we want to really go further. We want to continue with even innovation labs, and we want to really provide also the Indigenous people a platform to share their knowledge at large.
Outstanding. Speaking of this forum, I mean, I had the yesterday I had the opportunity to watch you at the Empowering Youth and Women in Science for Food Secure Future, talking about the future of this space for the next generation. And as we've been talking here today, I mean, this is not farming anymore, right? I mean, this is genomics, this is artificial intelligence, it's agri-sciences. Talk a little bit about it, because I know there's a variety of forums coming up. I mean, this is under the World Food Forum, but I think in a couple of weeks you have the Paris International Agricultural Show. You have Future Food Asia coming up in May. Talk a little bit about this discussion, not just for girls and women, but also sort of the youth and the next generation that really need to be there and be excited about the agri-sciences in general.
So when I was at McGill University back in 2004, 2005, I remember as a university, I was in the agriculture faculty in McDonald campus. There was a huge problem to attract Canadian students to agriculture. So as a faculty, there was a problem. And that problem is not really in McGill University only, it's in many universities. So agriculture is not attracting people and not attracting youth because it's not sexy enough, maybe. It's not modern enough. It hasn't gone through the same transformation as other sectors. And that's really, we have to change it. So we have really to change the way we do agriculture and the way we explain it to youth. We need to bring them an opportunity, and also we need to adopt more innovation, but also give them more space to innovate in this space of agriculture. And I think really with the new sciences that are coming and the new application and the new adoption of science, we could do that. With the digitalization per se, for example, digitalization per se hopefully will attract youth to come and really innovate in the space of the agriculture and food. But also what we need to do, I think, and that's really, it's a dilemma for many, many countries, is that we have most of the farming community, it's an Asian farming community. Most of the people working in agriculture at large, particularly in the global south, are above 60. So we need really to see a way to transform the system so that young people find a place for it to make a career. So one area is innovation. The other area is the wages per se. How could we make sure that the farmer, it's not the least paid person? How could we really give food and agriculture, particularly food, the right price, and then bring that price not only to the intermediary people, but to the farmer themselves? And this is really, it's a huge problem. And we need really to have a better analysis of the agri-food system and find entry point where we can bring youth to the production system, to the post-harvest, to the transformation, to the logistic, and maybe create more SMEs and more ideas like for transformation. It is given that most of the transformation is happening in the northern hemisphere, and whereas the production in the south, which in itself it's inefficient. So what if we bring more transformation, be it pre-production or post-production, to the countries? It will allow us to attract youth to the sector, and it will allow us to be more efficient. So we have less things that are transported back and forth from different countries. And as a matter of fact, Ira, WTO many times stated that any commodity in the world cross borders at least twice, which means it's produced in one place, it comes back in a different form, and it could be flown back to the other country or past the border again in another format. So the inefficiency of the agri-food system right now, particularly in globalization and because of monoculture and because of the economic system, we should start think about it, redesign it differently, and redesign it around more attraction of youth to the sector, more innovation in the whole agri-food system, and creating more opportunities for small businesses to be developed by youth around that agri-food system, particularly in the south. Particularly in the south, because we have a lot of young people that are unemployed, and we need to produce more for that particular south, and not only produce, but also produce and transform and get the different components of the agricultural produce that we are producing. So there is a need, and I think we could do that by really bringing those opportunities to the youth and bringing innovation to them, and allow them really to embrace digitalization, embrace innovation, and provide them with the finance for it. If there is no finance, you can't do it. So finance and investment in youth and innovation in the global south particularly is a must, sincerely. But it applies for the north as well. But in the north, we see it has taken up in the last century quite well, whereby you look at the size of farming, of ranches in Australia or Canada, it's definitely fully automated. It's only a few people managing hundreds of hectares. So whereas in the south, it's mostly very small scale producers with no technology, no innovation, almost zero. So it's a great opportunity that I hope really policymakers gonna grab and take action, because there is the policy component that is necessary to make that change, and there is the finance, and there is the tech transfer and the sharing knowledge as well that is key to go that path.
Absolutely. Next month, I believe in March 8th, International Women's Day is coming up, and I know there is going to be discussion all about the future of women in agriculture. Talk a little bit about what you're going to be talking about then.
Yeah, so I think every March, every 8th of March, we all really talk a lot about women, but really we all agree that we have to work on it all year around. But really, FAO, through its various division and decentralized offices, is working very hardly with all member countries on many initiatives to make sure we empower women, and we mainly, I always say, provide them with equal opportunities, equal access to the most appropriate technologies and innovation, but also access to finance, access to owning land, access to own assets. So these are very important. I'm very happy this year in April, FAO will launch a report on the status of women in agriculture, which will inform us about what's happening. How is it happening? Is the situation improving for women in agriculture, or is it worsening? So please stay tuned and check the report that's going to be launched in April and going to be published on FAO website.
Wonderful, wonderful, absolutely. So before we wrap up, I mentioned a couple of days you have the Paris International Agricultural Show coming up, and then in May, Future Food Asia. Any other forums, conferences that we can expect to see you at, potentially listen to you, meet you, if we're traveling in the same location? Any other initiatives coming up that you would like to highlight? Please take the floor.
So definitely, I mean, I'm very happy that we're going to also be part of the AIM4C Climate Summit. It's the Agriculture Innovation Mission, Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate Summit. That's going to be very important. But also, we have numerous activities within the office. I would like to invite everybody to visit really our website, and that's in www.fao.org, Science, Technology, and Innovation. And there you have many publications. You have lots of announcements of few publications. One of them going to happen in few days, and that's on biodiversity, both in agriculture and agroforestry.
Sure.
In Ecuador, and that's part of the awardees of the recently recognition of the globally important agricultural heritage system, the GIAS, by FAO. There is also the importance of innovation, and we have a new award. It's not an award. It's a program to come up with innovative ideas. So it's a hackathon, you can call it. I don't know these new names very well, but we are launching a new fund for innovation, whereby we are looking at new ideas, but we are looking mostly in this forum. It's much more business process innovations or institutional innovation. So how could you change either the way you do your business, or how could you change the institutions to bring in more efficiency and bring it higher impact on the ground? And that's an innovation fund that we have at FAO, and that we are looking forward really to see how could we do it and applying it the way we are doing it. It's applied either to the emergency program, or applied to the nutrition, or applied to blue transformation. So it's coming and it's covering all sectors. So we just got all the application in. We're going through the screening, and we would be very happy really to announce the winners and see really, I'm sure we got very bright ideas that we never thought of, that hopefully are low-hanging fruit, but can make huge impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I always enjoy hearing about sort of these venture initiatives at such large organizations like FAO, and we're sort of thinking like sort of a startup at the same time. So that's really exciting. And yeah, I mean, just wish you and the organization the best at all of this, because it is just such a vital mission that you're fulfilling there. Again, for everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode of our show across the podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, again, you've been listening to Dr. Ismahane Elouafi, Chief Scientist, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. We will put the link in the bio of the show, focusing on better production, nutrition, environment, and life. Ismahane, I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk and educate us for a little while on these topics. Obviously, thank you for leading them. And as we like to say here on our show, again, thank you for helping create a better tomorrow for so many people out there via what you do. It's a really very inspiring story.
Thank you very much, Ira, for the opportunity. And I hope really that I'm leaving you with the hope that we are at the best time to innovate. We need it because the challenges are just too many, and we need really to act very quickly. And the only way for us is really to transform our agri-food system and engage all actors, particularly the youth. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Ira.
Wonderful message. It was great having you.